Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Imagine you're sitting in a theater, popcorn in hand, waiting for the movie to start. The lights go down, the screen glows, and the movie fades in. Finally, I've been waiting to see this film. It looks like a burglary scene is unfolding, but something's not quite right. Wait, are those numbers on the screen? Is is that scene numbers? What? And a studio logo? Oh my goodness, what is going on? And copyright information? That's so weird. Well, I guess it is a burglary. The title says so, but 3 camera angles? Wait, which angle am I supposed to be looking at? I don't even know. What is happening here? Okay, could this get any weirder? Is this supposed to be an action scene? Whoa, that was bright. Finally, a normal looking chase scene with bullet points. Are they showing me an outline of what's happening? Okay, that's really weird. I think he's getting away. That's not good. I think they accidentally played the director's cut. My brain is exhausted. And that's what happens to our learners when slides look like that. The information might be really good, but the experience isn't. Our brains crave clarity, rhythm, and emotion, not clutter. We don't learn from chaos, we learn from story. I'm Jody Wissing, a presentation creatologist and storyteller, and I do get asked a lot, what exactly is a presentation creatologist? Well, it's a person who is part designer, part storyteller, and part experience architect. I got the word creatologist from the first issue of Fast Company magazine back in 1995, and they featured unique job titles, and one was from a guy who worked for Fruit of the Loom. He was an underwear creatologist. Isn't that a great title? Anyway, I ditched the underwear part, but I've always loved the creatologist word. As for the storyteller part, when I was little, I told a lot of stories, and most of the time they got me in trouble. Especially that first playground presentation where I thought everyone in my kindergarten class needed to know the truth about Santa. Fast forward to today, it all worked out great, and now I tell stories for a living. Now, some of you might be thinking, I'm an educator and I really don't do presentations. And that's okay if presentations aren't your day job. At some point, you're likely going to need to pitch an idea, share some research, or visualize a lesson in a way that captures attention and helps people learn. My passion for storytelling through presentations came from my own difficulties focusing in school. I was the daydreamer, and year after year I sat next to the teacher because they thought proximity might equal focus. Well, it didn't. Having ADHD and dyslexia was difficult, but the experience taught me something really important. It made me see that engagement isn't just about attention, it's about aligning with how people process information. Presentations are my professional playground. It's where ideas come to life, learning connects, and meaning becomes visible. That's what Storyslides is all about. Using story to transform static slides into visual experiences that don't just teach and inform, but engage and inspire. So how do we make that happen? It starts with 3 ideas. First, find the stories. Stories are how we get from information to inspiration. Then design for clarity and understanding. This is how we bring stories to life. And finally, interact with intention. Interacting with our slides creates an unforgettable learning experience. Let's start with finding stories. Now, where do we find stories? And how do we get started on our search for relevant ones? Stories don't always show up on demand, and most of us aren't walking around with a library full of perfect examples ready to go. When I'm looking for stories, where do I start? I look to my content first, then to my stories, or stories from others, and then to well-known stories. Let's look at finding a story in your own information or content. Sometimes the key to finding a story is to simply just look for one. Here's some content I received with good information but no visible story. When I get slides like this, I'll usually read, then highlight some important information, and usually I'll find a story or two. Here I found info about the opioid crisis, and nobody would have ever seen it buried in all this text. With a powerful visual and minimal copy, the story is clear. Now I can share the details because the audience understands what the issue is and why it matters. Then use your own stories. How do you relate to your info? Or you can use stories from other people. What interesting tales have you heard on your topic? Has anyone seen this meme about quicksand? It's probably more relatable to people my age, but one of my friends posted it on social media and I thought, quicksand is a big deal. Yep, that's me in quicksand. And it's actually pretty scary. But it made me think of something I heard on a podcast a while ago. Your mess is your message. I love that. Start with your own stories. We learn from our mistakes, right? Those are the best stories and we know them well. There's nothing more authentic than you talking about your own experiences. And of course, you can get stories from other people. Just make sure they're accurate, get permission to share them, or tell them anonymously. And you can also use famous or well-known stories. To find these, most of the time, a Google search is going to give you what you need. And we also have AI at our disposal now. Here's one I use quite a bit in my presentation training. Did you know that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not have the "I have a dream" part in his script? And can you imagine if he had had PowerPoint? Oh, that would have been bad. And depending on the quality of his slides, going off script may have not been an option and we would have never had that. So what if you've looked in all those places and you're still not finding the story you need? That's when you start mining for stories. Learning materials often start as information, not as stories, and it's our job to find them. Mining for a story sometimes means looking beyond the materials. What changes once someone understands or applies what you're teaching? That's where the real stories live. When working for a tech company, I frequently heard how boring software is and there's no stories to tell. And I once responded by saying, what if I told you our software saved my life? Well, that got their attention. So how did it save my life? Well, here's the story. Did you ever feel like you're going nowhere? I mean, you probably want to be going somewhere, maybe anywhere but where you are, but nowhere? Does anybody choose to go nowhere? Well, I did. I decided to take a trip to nowhere. It had been on my bucket list for about 3 years. So nowhere is an actual place, and this is nowhere, and it's really hard to get to. It's so remote that you can roam the 300,000 plus acres all day long and never see another person. There are no paved roads, and they're rated by how many spare tires you need. Who carries multiple spare tires? And some road building may be required. You can't make this stuff up. Long story short, I used our software to register for a campsite in the area. People don't understand how dangerous it can be. There are 4 to 5 fatalities each year due to the extreme heat and lack of resources. But because of the warning messages and info provided by the software, I was prepared and I survived. I made it to nowhere safely, and I even made it to the other side of nowhere. Stories make it much easier to visualize your message or your lesson, and with the expected outcome that your audience can anticipate. So use a story perspective starting with your audience's point of view. Each person processes information through their own experiences, yet collectively they're often asking the same core questions. These days, everything's related to AI. And I was working on a project where they had a really strong AI message, but the audience was genuinely concerned that AI was going to take their jobs. And without addressing that, they would have never been able to hear the message. To address their fears, it was essential to identify and discuss the root cause. Pop culture has portrayed AI as human-like, and it makes us picture robots, not resources, something to compete with instead of collaborate with. Here's an opening story I created for an AI presentation, which has been used repeatedly with great success. Some of the early robots we remember were cute and friendly, like C-3PO and R2-D2 from Star Wars. We loved them. And then came the movie iRobot, and we began to consider the potential for robots to be truly scary. But is this an accurate portrayal of artificial intelligence? It's correlated, but it's not representative of the AI we use in our everyday lives right now. We use bots, not robots. So what's the difference between the two? Bots are software that automate digital tasks, and robots interact with the physical environment and automate physical tasks. This is a more realistic portrayal of a robot, and they do exist. But since you can't really see a bot, as it's not a physical thing, people have given it a face, thus the robot reference for AI. We really need to address the elephant in the room, the questions and underlying thoughts our audience may have. In this case, visuals help people to understand their fears so they could hear the message that AI is a great tool and bots are going to enhance their work, allowing them to focus on more strategic and creative responsibilities. So let's continue a little bit with artificial intelligence. I like to call it artificial imagination. That was for my SpongeBob fans. AI has changed the way we create, and it's an incredible tool that can help us uncover stories faster and find creative ways to express them. In teaching and learning, that can be really powerful. AI can help us generate examples, explain complex ideas through story, or visualize abstract concepts in new ways. But right now, AI is still kind of the Wild West. We're discovering new ways to use it every single day. Sometimes brilliant, sometimes bizarre, sometimes both. The technology is racing forward. We can generate stunning images in seconds, but that also means we've entered this strange new landscape where we can't always tell what's real anymore. We used to look at an image on social media and just marvel at its beauty. Now we look and we wonder, is it real? That uncertainty changes how we see things. It changes how we feel things. The power of storytelling hasn't changed, though. People still connect to authenticity, imperfection, and the human perspective. So the question becomes, how do we effectively use AI in our storytelling? Now, I could easily do an entire presentation on this. As educators and creators, it's our job to guide AI, not tame it. Here are a few things that may help. Be transparent. And what exactly do I mean by this? It's not about telling people every single time you use AI. It just means don't try to push something off as real if it's fake. The whole idea of using AI visual storytelling is to support the story, not distract from it. Keep it human. When you use AI to help with content and media, make sure the words still sound like you. Your tone, your rhythm, your emotion. That's what students and audience connect with, you, the storyteller. And authenticity is always what we desire. Being real allows your audience to see themselves in your stories. If they can't, how can they learn or be willing to adopt a new idea? AI should be your creative partner. The story should come from you. And when you pull up these search words on stock media sites, you get hundreds of humans shaking hands with robots. This is what we want to avoid. I've never shaken hands with a robot, and I likely won't in the near future. Maybe a better way to visualize your story is to look for something suggestive like this digital image, or even a person using AI. I love to use images of people when possible, but only when they're realistic enough for people to see themselves in the scene. Set the stage for your stories by providing context. Context is the circumstances that provide an understanding of a story and influences its meaning. It provides additional layers of information so we can apply it in our own situations. So I have this kind of strange hobby. I like to find abandoned buildings or abandoned places and unique places and photograph them. I visited Bombay Beach, California, which is an odd artist community, and it was hot outside. Now, when I say hot, what do you think the temperature was? If y'all want to pop your answers in the chat so everyone can see the range of numbers, that would be great. But the temperature that you respond with is probably based on your geographic location or even the hottest that you've ever experienced. It was 123 degrees. And of course, I took this photo right before it changed. But giving you the actual temperature provides some context, but I can give you even more. What does 123 feel like? Have y'all ever been cremated? 123 degrees is miserably hot. And my phone quit working because it was overheated while I was holding it. But I can even provide more context. I went to this outdoor art experience, and right after pulling into the parking lot, this girl walks in front of the car and just collapses. Several people, including myself, rushed over to help her, and she was fine, but she could have had a heat stroke or been in really bad shape. By me providing details, you know it wasn't just hot, it was dangerously hot. Here's an example I used recently to tell a story. Now, this is a pitch deck, and my client teaches companies how to effectively market to people over 50 through data-driven strategies. We started with a story about the perception of older people, and then we talked about how 50 plus people see 50 plus people. Well, being the target audience, those of us just over 50 don't consider ourselves old. But how does society view old? And it's changed pretty drastically over the years. Do y'all remember the Golden Girls? If not, it was a sitcom from the late 80s. The three main actresses who were around the same age in real life were 47, 53, and 55. Fast forward to 2010, Sex and the City 2 came out. The main character, Carrie, is 55, and the others are in their early 50s. Wow, mind blown. Times have changed. People are living a lot longer, and this was a great example of why my client services are so important. Context provides perspective. Next up is design with clarity. Every great story deserves great visuals. Let's look at how to design slides to bring your stories to life. Now, we've all heard this before. A picture is worth 1,000 words. If I tried to tell you this story about my neighbor's longhorn Benny kissing his pet rooster Chupa, if you even believed me, could you have possibly pictured this? You seriously can't make this stuff up, and it would have taken me way more than 1,000 words to try to describe it. So what does 1,000 words look like? Now, of course, we would never use this many words on a slide, although I've seen some people come pretty close. It takes 4 to 5 minutes to read or say 1,000 words. That's a lot of time to describe something you could just show and speak to in a few seconds. Visuals streamline communication, giving you the power to tell a more complete story. I can add to the story about John being a high-end fashion photographer in New York City who got tired of the rat race, and he moved to the middle of the desert to an off-grid tiny house. Pretty crazy, right? He was very resourceful and blogged about his experience every day for more than a decade. Visiting him was always a fun experience. His sense of humor was unparalleled. I like to use one strong image whenever possible. Showing individual images as the story progresses is ideal. Using image collages result in what I like to call the visual version of bullet points. The viewer's brain works really hard to interpret each image individually, and then try to figure out how to relate it to one another or even your overall story. Use one image at a time to support your story, and it'll strengthen your message. Simplicity. We've all heard that less is more. And simplicity isn't about stripping things away. It's about aligning your story and script with visuals. We often start with numerous ideas and information. When I was working on this presentation, it was no different. I can speak on the topic of visualizing for days. How do I decide what to put in? I love this quote. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. Simplifying takes time. Our visuals must highlight the main points and key messages without clutter. Why is it so hard to simplify? So this was the bottom of my junk drawer years ago. It's a little embarrassing to show it. But I was into scanograms. It's where you throw stuff on a document scanner bed and you create images out of it. So if I'm going to the junk drawer to find something, the likelihood of me finding it quickly or at all is pretty slim. If your project starts like this, the key is to get the message simplified for clarity and focus. When going through the creative process, two components must work together: your overall message and story, and how it will be incorporated into the design and visuals. You can have the perfect image, but if it's not supporting the story and the story isn't supporting the images on your slides, they could look like clickbait, not a story. If it gets attention, it likely won't have the clarity or understanding to get your students or audience to take action. Let's look at a simple example. A doormat. The message here is simple: welcome. The mat itself serves a purpose, though, to wipe your feet, but it's also welcoming you to the house. Now, what would this look like if we dumped a bunch of info on it about doormats? It's all accurate information, but it completely misses the intended welcome message, and nobody's going to read all that. Now, you could simplify it, but it still just really isn't communicating that main message. We should always try to find the simplest way to visualize our stories. And you can get creative with it, have some fun with it, and sometimes just an image works. When piecing together your story and visuals to create a design, simplicity is always going to be your strongest tool. Make your visuals efficient and accessible while telling your story. So the next thing we want to do is eliminate visual clutter. And what is visual clutter? It's any elements not needed to support your story. Your brain processes everything it sees to be able to make a decision on what to do with the information. The average person makes approximately 35,000 decisions per day. That's about one decision every 2 seconds. No wonder my brain is so tired by the end of the day. Eliminating visual clutter creates a clear and singular focus. And that focus means fewer decisions to make, and people can pay more attention to the message. Now, what specifically do I mean by visual clutter? Let's bring these people back. I love their expressions. And since I took out the visual clutter, this is what it may look like with some added back in, although a bit exaggerated. Let's take it out one at a time. The first thing I always do is take slide numbers off. People use them as timers. And if you have a hidden slide, they're going to wonder what you're keeping from them. I also take logos off. Branded is good, but logos aren't needed on every single slide. And I like to make the copyright subtle. If it's necessary, add it. And a lot of times it's a legal thing, but don't worry too much about accessibility. As long as it's on there, I kind of rather they not look at it anyway. And the icon here isn't contributing to the clarity of the message. I use icons for visual organization and processes, which it's just not needed here. Now I took out the filler words and unnecessary graphic elements. The copy is simple and the speaker can say the rest. Now, I'm not saying that visual elements are bad. There are times when they work really well. But I ask this question about every element on my slides. Is it supporting my message, or is it adding a level of complexity? Next, we want to show the journey. And before we even say a word, our visuals are already speaking. They're setting the tone, they're building curiosity, and they're preparing the audience for the story we're about to tell. A story is a journey of starting in one place and ending up somewhere else. They're here, and you want them to be there. There is utopia, where they've adopted your idea, learned a lesson, or bought your product, and their life is a whole lot better. Think of it like a video game. You're picking up tools and artifacts to help you get to the next level and ultimately to win the game. A journey is similar. It includes stages and challenges and experiences along the way. Showing the journey makes our stories relatable. Here's a brief opening story that illustrates this concept, and I did this for a leadership presentation. We start life learning new things and how to do things. We learn what works and what doesn't. As we get older, we realize the consequences of our actions and how it makes life easier or harder. Then we get a job, we work our way up, and now we're managing people. How do we learn to be the best leader we can be? What makes leadership easier or harder? What works and what doesn't? Now, we could have just put this image up and talked through it, but it would have taken more time to describe her journey. This linear series of images visualizes important milestones, pulling the audience into the journey and the story. Next, visualize data with meaning. So I used to be a financial analyst, and anyone who knows me gives me an insane look when I tell them this, because not many creatives can say they came from such a left brain background. The funny thing is I hate math. I'm terrible at it. But I love numbers. And why? Because they tell stories. And of course, I'm sure you figured out by now, I love stories. How often have we seen complex data without a simple explanation of what it means or what to do with it? Remember the opioid story? Let's revisit that. Here's some data supporting that story. Now, I could just pop this up on the screen and talk through it. But if you look at the title, it's just a description of the information. How would your audience know how to apply it? I like to answer and visualize two questions when I show data. What is the data saying? That's the story. And what should we do with it? That's the call to action. So let's visualize the answers to these questions. Now, there are many creative ways to show data, but is showing it even necessary? Is it strengthening the story? Sometimes it is good to show it. In this case, I think it takes away from the narrative. So here I can talk about the sharp increase in opioid-related deaths, which is the story. And I'm going to take a quick side note here and go down a little rabbit trail because I do get a lot of comments about this. And there are images of people overdosing. However, I don't recommend ever using shock value images. They're not only distracting and disturbing, but they're likely not the message we want people to remember. All right, back off the rabbit trail. Then ask, how can we leverage open data, the call to action? I simply just want them to think about ways they can use open data to solve the problem. And then now let's talk about visualizing the surreal or even the invisible. Those can be really difficult. How do you visualize efficiency, trust, or my personal favorite, transparency? How can you get to things that are more tangible and easier to visualize? One of my favorite places to go is 𝗬𝗏𝗡. You would love it. Go check it out. What? You've never heard of it? What is it? Oh, well, it's best described as an immersive art experience. Now, you may go check it out someday, but you're likely just going to forget about it. But what if I provided some additional details and visuals to entice you? It's in Texas and it's called The Real Unreal. When an ordinary family encounters the extraordinary, an inspiring tale of creativity, community, and the power of imagination unfolds within a mesmerizing interactive artscape. Whew, that sounds like a lot of corporate mission statements I've read. The visual is interesting, but it's not enough for me to understand what it is. I'm intrigued, but it's still very abstract. Here's another description. 𝗬𝗏𝗡 is a choose-your-own-adventure experience. Similar to life, in every space you encounter, you're presented with several options on how to move forward. Behind every door is either a new world to explore or a clue to solve a mystery. Now that's better, but we can do one more level of detail. It's a normal looking house from the front, but inside it's an interactive story taking you through portals into alternate universes. What looks like everyday house furnishings might actually be a portal. Now that's better, but what if I added an example of one of the everyday furnishings? The washer and dryer are portals taking you into another universe. We went from an immersive art experience to an inspiring tale of creativity to a choose your own adventure to it looks like a normal house with portals everywhere to the furnishings could be a portal and the washer and dryer are actually portals. Do you want to go? What level of detail sold you? It's different for everyone, so use visuals to provide detail. An immersive art experience is abstract and surreal. Even with visuals, it requires a lot of information. The washer and dryer are tangible objects. Details will likely get you closer to things that are easier to visualize, allowing your students and audience to decide when they're ready to adopt your idea or take action. Next, I want you to channel your inner director and tell stories like the movies. We live in an age of information and entertainment. We need the information, but we also want to be entertained. And that doesn't make us shallow or superficial. We have a finite amount of time, and that time is valuable. So how can we take a large amount of data and information and make it into experiences that entertain? I believe there's a lot we can learn about storytelling from the film industry. Take B-roll, for instance. What is B-roll? Well, this is what the dictionary says, but I'm going to simplify it a bit. B-roll is supporting or secondary footage that is used in video production. It provides additional perspectives, context, or visual interest, and it can serve many purposes. B-roll sets the stage. We're not just presenting information, we have a story to tell. B-roll evokes emotions and feelings. This one's my worst nightmare. She's bored. B-roll provides context and environmental information as well. If I was there, what would I see? For presentations, B-roll doesn't have to be video either. Images work well if the visuals align with the content and we use enough to show the journey. Think back to the leadership story. Each photo showed the environment and set a mood. Here she's in her room, probably grounded because she's not looking very happy. Leveraging this cinematic technique will draw your audience into the story and keep them engaged. Next, use 100% of your media real estate. And no, I don't mean stuff everything on your slides. I like to use full screen images, maximizing the available space. Think about an IMAX theater and how the screen is wrapped around you. It's like you would see things in real life. You're immersed in it. Let's look at some actual real estate. The story here is that I live in a very odd neighborhood. One street north is a house that looks like it should be condemned. One street south has $5 million houses. And if I take this full screen image and I give it a border, making the image smaller, it adds another element for the brain to process. In your subliminal mind, it's like looking through a window, and now you're a bit removed from the scene. All right, let's bring it back full screen. And since this is a story of comparison, it's helpful to show the two images side by side. I'm still maximizing the screen real estate, but now I can talk about the houses, or I can show you my tiny house that's in between the two. Like I said, it's an odd neighborhood. The purpose of using visuals is to communicate information quickly and efficiently. The simplicity of a full screen visual is a great way to do that, and it's easy to create. With so many sources for visuals, AI generated, stock, personal photos, consistency it matters more than ever now. Without consistency, our presentations may look like Franken-Dex, which makes the slides really difficult to follow. So try to use the same color palette, the tone, mood to keep your story and visuals flowing. Now, I've never done this before. It's first debut, but I decided to count the different types of images and show how many I used of each of them in the presentation. And as you can see, it's a pretty even mix of different types. Let me show you how I check for the Franken factor. Step back and look at your deck as a whole. If any of the pieces are off, just adjust those slides until they flow as one. If you're using PowerPoint, you can use slide sorter mode like I'm showing you here to look at your entire presentation. And we have so many image sources now like AI and stock libraries that it's easy to forget the power of your own perspective. Authenticity doesn't mean avoiding those tools. It means balancing them with images that we've captured and moments we've experienced. Remember this image I used earlier? Now, I could have used AI or Photoshop to change the temperature to 123, but instead I told you it changed right after I took the photo, so you knew this was an authentic, real photo. Now, how can you incorporate more of your own images? By living adventurously and capturing visuals along the way. Okay, so this is a prop at a museum. Don't live that adventurously. But as of last night, I had 65,466 photos and videos on my phone. If a story pops into my mind and I had an opportunity to take a photo and I didn't, I would get so mad at myself. We're always carrying a camera, right? And did you know you can talk on these things too? It's crazy. I photographed travels, epic adventures, fun times with my friends, and really weird things my sister dares me to do. Look, in our defense, our dad refused to wear his teeth, so we told him we would find a use for them. Take a lot of photos. They don't cost anything, and it fosters fun and creativity. About 20% of the images in this presentation were ones that I took. Having more visuals to pull from and customize ones makes it easier to visually support your own stories. Finally, interact with intention. The magic happens when what you say and what you show work together as one. So neither slides nor the speaker should stand alone in a presentation. It's a little bit like show and tell. Slides show, and without a storyteller, just pictures and text. They could easily be a book or a document. A speaker telling a story without visuals is just a voice, and that would be considered a speech or maybe even a podcast. And there's nothing wrong with those, but we're telling story with slides here. So you and your slides teach together, showing and telling, working in sync to create an experience. It's not about clicking through your slides. It's about you interacting with them, being intentional about how you move and what you show. Together, you and your slides should become one. Okay, maybe not like this guy. And hopefully not like in a stuck on the same slide for 3 minutes kind of way either. Visuals set the scene. Your words build the connection. The pacing, the movement, and the rhythm between the two, that's what draws people in. When slides carry the story and you bring it to life, it stops feeling like a slideshow and it starts feeling like a shared learning experience. So how can language help your students or your audience in the story? So phrases like "next slide, please," or "as you can see in this image," it pulls the audience out of the story and back into the structure. It reminds people they're in a presentation instead of an experience. Instead, let your visuals guide the language naturally. Here's what happens next, or imagine this. So it's important to use clear, current, and visual language, choosing words that connect, not confuse or mislead. When attending a presentation, have you ever been sidetracked by something that was said? Here's one of my favorite examples. I heard this all the time while working for a software company. Our software is best in breed. I'm like, really? Because I need to know how that works. I'm pretty sure we did not breed software. Every time I heard it or saw it, this is what I saw in my head. It's completely taken me away from the actual message about having great software. Maybe just show somebody using the software and talk about the benefits instead of just saying you're the best. But make it all about your audience. They're the heroes in your stories. Transitions aren't just about moving from one slide to the next. They're about keeping the story moving. When visuals pause, so does your audience. When most people think about transitions, they think about animations, right? Slides flying in, spinning out, fading dramatically to the next thing. But good transitions aren't about visual effects. They're about story flow. The best transitions are really the ones that go unnoticed because they feel seamless. Also, when you stay parked on a slide longer than it fits what you're saying, people are trying to make the connection. And if they can't, they're going to stop listening and likely even tune out the rest of your slides. Switch to a slide that gives focus back to your words. You can use a neutral slide. So if you have something where you don't have a slide for it, perfectly fine. Here's one I created for a keynote presentation that just simply includes the presentation title with a nice background graphic. Uh-oh. So don't just go to a blank or blacked out slide because people are going to wonder if the projector bulb just went out or if it's virtual, they might think there's technical difficulties. Did y'all think that even for a second? Use screen movement for focus. Our eyes are drawn to movement, so how can we leverage it to guide our audience's attention? It's part of our survival instincts, the fight or flight. When we see something move, we assess it and we make decisions on whether we need to act. Have y'all seen this new feature in cars? The brake lights blink 2 or 3 times before staying on. And this is to get your attention. Once it stops, you're on to look at something else. Well, hopefully after stopping your car. Movement keeps the focus where you want it, and it helps your audience visually follow the journey. So you're part of the presentation. You're a visual. If you're speaking, I'm a visual. We spend so much time designing slides and videos and graphics, but the truth is the most powerful visual in any presentation is you. This is my argument for the speaker being on camera most, if not all of the time for a virtual presentation. And think about if you were teaching or presenting in person, you wouldn't be standing behind a wall and just letting your slides talk for you, right? Well, unless you're the Wizard of Oz, but you're probably not. Now, I know some presenters say they don't like keeping their camera on because they can't see the audience. So my advice is to find your Wilson, like the movie Castaway. Oh, my camera's coming in and out there. But put something near your camera that helps you remember that there are humans on the other side, people learning, reacting, and connecting. Presence really does matter. Your face, your gestures, your expressions, those are all part of the story, and they also help build trust with your audience or your students. So we design a lot for how people learn, but we also need to design for how people lose focus. Because no matter how engaging we are, attention drifts. Maybe we start daydreaming or watching online, your audience, they might get distracted. Will you be clear where you are when they return? Part of interacting with your slides is using them as a tool to bring your audience back. Or maybe even you. I've taken a couple of rabbit trails on presentations and I forgot where I left off. I'm able to re-engage with my slides. So simple minimalist slides will allow anyone to transition back into a presentation with ease. Now, we also hear a lot about accessibility and design, and we usually think about colors and fonts and clarity. But accessibility also means designing for how people actually pay attention. We want to create slides and interactions that make it easy for everyone to stay or to come back to the learning experience. Okay, the session description promised a surprise at the end, challenging you to rethink everything you believe about presentations, and here it is. As a presentation professional, I get the question, most often is, how many slides should a presentation have? But wait, before I share the answer with you, how many slides do you think you've seen in this presentation? And feel free to answer in the chat. And then when you can see what your peers and how they're answering the question. But I usually hear like some people say, 35, 40, one or two people say, oh, more than 100. I don't know what the average is. I would totally be guessing. But you've seen 275 slides. When I rehearsed, that was approximately 9 seconds per slide. Did it feel like that many? And was anybody actually counting? Now back to the original question. How many slides should a presentation have? Use as many slides as it takes to tell your stories, communicate your ideas, or teach your lessons. There's no magic number. If people are engaged, they don't know or care how many slides you have. And you don't have to hit that 9-second mark either. That was not at all what I was saying. Whatever feels right to tell your story and give people enough information and detail. Instead of thinking of a presentation as individual parts of a speaker, an audience, and some visuals, think of all those things working harmoniously together. This dynamic interaction creates an unforgettable experience. Visuals are important, but how your speaker and audience sees and interacts with them is most important. Think of Visualized Slide as a bridge of communication between you and your students or your audience. When the two are seamlessly connected, an experience is created. Stories with Visualized Slides turns information into insight for learners. We can't make people take action, but we can make the moment irresistible. When content feels alive and inviting, people don't hesitate. They slide right into action. Visualized stories are the portal to the audience's imagination. When they can easily see a solution to a problem, understand a concept, or see how their life could be better, it will inspire action. Do you have questions? If so, follow me into the Q&A portal. Answers await. All right. Do we have any questions out there?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
A lot of compliments.
Oh, good.
We
Thank you.
have a question. Can you please talk about how to leverage tone when speaking?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Can you please talk about how to leverage tone when speaking?
Um, I'm assuming you're talking about your voice and your
Mhm.
inflections and things like that. I find that I have to a couple of things. One is that I have to feel like I'm talking to somebody. So being online when I talk about my Wilson, like I have to think about that and I do record myself. So when I'm rehearsing, I'll record it and I'll go back and watch it to make sure that I have the the voice that I want and that I sound like myself because you know how we all get that telephone voice. Hi, I'm Jody. Like I know I do that. And so to try not to do that by just being intentional about it and really practicing a lot, I can kind of control that.
Thank you. We have another question. Kind of a funny question, but how do I teach this to my set in their ways faculty? Any tips?
Oh, yes, I actually have a lot of tips on that one. You know what I find, I work with a lot of C-suite executives, and we've all been taught differently than what I'm showing you. And what I show is a lot exaggerated, but it is really just showing people the difference. And when I get clients, like I get new clients, and the people will they're coming in. First of all, I tell them how I work. If they haven't seen my stuff, they're going to be a bit surprised. And a lot of times people are blindsided when you create stuff like this, they're blindsided by it. And so I tell them up front because I don't want them to be blindsided. It's like you're going to give me 30 slides, I'm going to give you back 90 and I want you to try this. Like, bear with me. If you don't like what I do, I will put your 30 slides back. I'll try to make them as pretty as I can, and you can do whatever you want with them. But not once has anybody, I've had people do it with a couple of slides, but nobody's ever done it with a whole presentation. Like they see the value in it once you show them the difference, and that's the big part.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a couple more questions. When creating a slide deck, how much time do you allocate for finding slides, editing, and formatting them? What apps and platforms do you use, and can AI help to create slide decks?
Wow, that's a lot. So timing, I feel like I always spend too much time and I shouldn't, but I can tell you one of the most time consuming parts of working on a presentation is finding the right images. Everybody thinks it's so easy, and that is the hardest part to do. But if you start with a good template and you follow that and you are starting with something good, it's not going to take you as much time. And as far as tools, I have a lot that I use. For AI, I do use ChatGPT quite a bit. I've started using Nano Banana. I use Envato. I use Adobe Stock. I use all the Adobe products very heavily. But for AI, I use ChatGPT a lot to help me with the content part. And then the images, obviously, I use some of the other tools, Midjourney. There's some other ones. I do a lot in the Adobe products though. And I am a huge fan of PowerPoint. Say what you want about it. It's stable. You can do things in PowerPoint that you can't do in Google Slides. You can do some of the things in Keynote. I do like Keynote too. But I like having the morph transition. If y'all have ever used that, you saw a lot of the animations and things morphing. That is a tool I don't know that I could ever live without. Like AI, I can't live without AI anymore either.
All right, and then we've got, what are some of your favorite tools used to create this beautiful presentation?
Same thing. I always try to start with either my own photos or Adobe stock. I also use Shutterstock. Any of the big stock sites will work. And if you're on a limited budget, Pexels, some of those things. I actually have a whole session that I do on visualizing presentations and how to find stock photography because it's hard. Like there's some really cheesy, crazy stuff out there that you would never want to use in a presentation. And then, just finding it is and trying, with AI prompts, this is a good point. Whenever you don't get a result in AI that you want, you change the prompt, right? Well, you can kind of do the same things when you're searching for stock photography or anything like that, and you can try doing different things. Like sometimes I'll try putting in the word realistic and you get different results, or try adding in concept or abstract, but you try just using different words to get some different results out of it. But yeah, any of the stock sites are going to be really good.
All right, and then last question, and it's kind of a two-parter. Do you believe that all content can be made engaging? And any tips to make technical content more engaging?
I'm working on a training session for technical content right now as we speak. And yes, I do. And so here's my magic. I didn't have it in this presentation, but this is something that I use with all of my clients, and it has been a huge success. Is when you have a lot of technical information, usually that technical information is needed to know because of an outcome that you're trying to get. So the story really becomes your outcome. But a lot of times your audience may be a technical audience and they need that technical information. So I actually have a PowerPoint, because like I said, I do everything in PowerPoint. So I have the presentation, because if you just took all these slides, if you'll notice, if you do the handout that I have, I don't just give you my slides. Now I give you a little bit more, and I use a handout. You can put the technical information in there. So you do either a pre-read, you can do a leave behind document, but it's an 8.5 by 11. So it looks like a document that you would read. So people expect to see a lot of copy on it. And I give that to my clients. I have people that use it for sales pitches. I have people that use it for technical audiences like that. So their presentation slides are not the same ones that they're giving people as a leave behind document. So I think that really helps. Did I answer both the questions? ADHD.
I think so. I think so. And we are just at the top of time. So thank you again. Lots of comments about how great this presentation was. So thank you for your time today.
I had fun.
All right. We'll see you later. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one.